Bueno, ¿qué pasa, gente? ¿Cómo estamos? Bienvenidos a un vídeo para el canal. Hoy estamos en un nuevo vídeo de The Last of Us Parte 2 Remaster. Estamos por aquí con este jueguito para ver lo nuevo que ha salido, que han metido en el Remaster. Así que, a ver, aquí
Lector
tenemos.
de pantalla. No. Activa la narración del texto en pantalla.
Oye,
Botones hacia la izquierda.
calla. Qué susto, joder. Vale, idioma de texto, idioma de... Vale, lector de pantalla.
Lector de pantalla. No. Activa la narración.
No, eso no lo quiero. Que se calle, ¿eh? Vale, esto... Sí, así. Vale. Modo de renderizado HDR, brillo. Esto, bueno, esto da un poco igual, ¿no? Fidelidad. Bueno. Brillo. Así está bien. Sí, así está bien. Continuar. Vale, subtítulos. Sí. Historia y combate. Sí, todo. Este. Fondo. Sí, fondo. Nombres, sí. Colores en los nombres, no. Dirección. ¿Cómo que dirección? Ah, puedes poner color. Pues le pondría esto, ¿no? Y dirección. Esto no sé para qué sirve, pero bueno, se lo pongo porque queda bonito. Vale. Sonido. Bueno. Ah, esto es... Si por ejemplo Eli... Vale, pon que estás con Eli, ¿vale? Y estás con Dina al lado, ¿vale? Si Dina está a la derecha, solo se escucha en el casco derecho. ¿Es eso? Voy a poner que sí. Si eso luego se podrá quitar, supongo. Vale, continuar. A ver, yo lo que quiero mirar son los niveles perdidos estos que hay, el modo no retorno. O sea, la historia la vamos a hacer aquí en el canal, pero en un próximo, ¿vale? En un próximo. Ahora quiero mirar los niveles estos, que son, creo que son 3 niveles, que no se pusieron en el juego original. Creo que es eso. Vamos a mirar, vamos a ver. Naughty Dog. A ver, la verdad que se ve bastante igual. Pero yo porque yo le tengo muchísimo cariño a The Last of Us, a mí me renta. Vale, una mirada entre bambalinas al desarrollo de The Last of Us parte 2. Extras. Opciones, sin retorno. Vale. ¿Cómo se hizo? ¿Es esto? Niveles perdidos, vale. Juega las primeras versiones de los niveles que se eliminaron durante el desarrollo original del The Last of Us Parte 2. Estos niveles se muestran en un estado pre-alfa, inacabado, que refleja el aspecto que tenían cuando se eliminaron del juego. ¿Esto qué es? Mira el tráiler de Realista 2 de la creación de The Last of Us Parte 2 y escucha el podcast oficial. Vale. Ok. Y arte conceptual, ¿esto qué es? Échale un ojo a los diseños originales del juego. Encuentra coordenadas y completa el juego al individual superior para ganar puntos y bloquear contigo. Ah, vale, sí, esto es lo que es. Y comentarios. Vale. Extras, ¿esto qué es? Vale, esto es el modo de la guitarra. Aspectos, galería de filtros, cambia el aspecto del juego. Esto sí. Vale. Modificadores de juego. Cambia el comportamiento. Y esto consulta tus reglas de modo carrera de velocidad, tu mejor tiempo de cada dificultad. Anda. Créditos, y esto es galería de modelo, que esto es... ¿Qué he hecho? Ah, vale. Desbloquear. Ellie de Seattle, sí. Vale, bueno, está bien eso, ¿no? Vale, salir. Sí. Claro, supongo que lo que tiene este juego es que los tiempos de carga son bastante menores. Y esto es lo de el modo este de la guitarra. Vale, pues vamos a probar los niveles perdidos, vamos a darle. Juega las primeras versiones de los niveles que se eliminaron durante el desarrollo. Estos niveles se muestran. Estos niveles contienen spoilers y te recomendamos que completes... No, el juego ya me lo sé, o sea que... Vale, Ellie está nerviosa por asistir a una fiesta en Jackson. Este nivel se muestra en un estado pre-alfa ni acabado que refleja el aspecto que tenía con este nivel. No tiene diálogos hablados, solo líneas de marcadores de posición que se muestran como subtítulos. Alcantarillas de Seattle y la cacería. Vale. Ellie está nerviosa por asistir a una fiesta de Jackson. Ellie acaba atrapada en las alcantarillas de Seattle y Ellie sigue un rastro de sangre hasta un almacén abandonado. Vale. Comentario de lo de acción los comentarios de... No. Y esto comienza el nivel con un vídeo de... No. Bueno, le voy a dar así a todo a ver qué pasa. Sí, vamos a darle y a ver qué es. Es que quiero verlo desde el principio. A ver cómo va esto. Sí, a ver. Aunque sea una pre-alfa, yo me imagino. Ah, vale. Este es el director, supongo.
The reason we added this section is there are a few sequences, and we picked the 3 of the best ones, that we cut from the game. You know, often we build a game that's much bigger than what ends up being the final product. They were months away from being finished, but we wanted to give you an insight of what it's like when we built a game, because often we have this whole thing constructed and it doesn't have final art.
Bueno, pero supongo que será,
audio,
verá bien, ¿no? Me
nada.
imagino, porque...
And here you get to see the
No sé.
building blocks of what it's like when we first string a bunch of these levels together. This is the intro to the first deleted level, and this one is the roughest of the 3. We wanted to show more of how Jackson operates. So this is the festival where Ellie ultimately kisses Dina. This sequence would have come very late in the game as a flashback sequence while you're in the farm with Dina. And we wanted to show what is the rest of Jackson doing, and wanted to put on the stick, make it interactive. So you could see when you're outside, there are all these almost like carnival games that you can play. You could mix drinks, you could play with these kids that are playing a sort of clicker Marco Polo, sit down and listen to conversations. And all the different interactions were first or second pass, very early passes. The building blocks are there, but nothing is final. And ultimately, while we were very excited by this sequence, it's pretty fun and lighthearted. It just slowed things too much as we're barreling towards the end of the story at this point. So again, reminder, rough, missing audio, missing animation, missing gameplay tweaks, missing dialogue, but pretty representative of what it would have been. So, enjoy.
Vale, vamos a ver. Suspiro largo. Joder. Claro, aparecen los subtítulos, pero no tiene ni claro.
Originally, this level was going to transition us to farm. We would go all the way through to the dance, where Ellie and Dina share their first kiss. Then we would play through farm, and when Ellie plays the guitar at night, she would remember the Seth incident. So, the opening for this was a little tricky. We needed it to match at least a little what you might expect emotionally coming from prior beats, because we were already purposefully disorienting you in time and space. Remember, you just came from this huge fight. To jump straight into it would have been a little too jarring. After some back and forth, we rooted it in Ellie's nerves, calling back to her hands shaking in the theater. But this time, for a much more innocuous reason we'll find out later. She's nervous because she has a crush on Dina, who is the only reason why she's here at the dance.
Vale, sí, este es el momento en el que se ve un flashback en el cual se ve se llama Seth, me parece que es. Le dice algo a él y a Dina, porque son lesbianas, entonces como le dice algo de en plan, no beséis que hay niños, no sé qué. Joel se mete, Ellie se cabrea con Joel, es eso, creo que es eso, ¿no? Es esa parte. A ver, se ve bien. Se ve bien. Obviamente, pero...
Something we really wanted to do was highlight the way their lives had turned upside down since she went down this path. We had this idea of recontextualizing all of our usual gameplay mechanics that were designed for really violent ends. The workbench, door bashes, throwable weapons, and even the infected, which is my personal favorite. Peppered throughout the level are moments of levity or shared history, all the while seeing how happy and mundane they all were before her huge revenge odyssey.
Su enorme odisea de venganza. Vale. ¿Esto es Jackson? Sí.
It
A ver.
is not a festival without one of these throwing games. This one, of course, uses our throwable system where you're often chucking explosive things or stunning things, but for a more wholesome purpose, although some people take this game really seriously. A fun aspect of this is if you did well, you could win a toy here. Ellie would place it in her pocket. If you had done this, you'd find the toy with JJ, the baby, later back at the farm. When we cut this, the toy made it through anyway because it was so cute. It is the same one you see on the tractor at the farm. Ollie the elephant.
El que ves sobre el tractor en la granja. Ah, sí, me acuerdo, sí, vale. Mantén pulsado, vale. Este juego está mañado. Vale. A ver
The
más.
makeup artist is pretty simple. It's one of those little in-game scenes we peppered in to make it feel like Ellie had roots in the town. Hallie, our writer, mentioned that in her mind, an ex-girlfriend of Ellie's tattooed her arm to cover up her scar. So we figured this might be the only time you get to see that. We wanted to hint at it and allude to it and make it feel like there had been so much more that had been happening and so much more that Ellie threw away.
Ok. Pero no entiendo por qué no están los diálogos, que les hubiese costado. Ah, pues yo no sabía eso. O sea, que el tatuaje que tiene es para tapar la cicatriz de la mordedura, claro. Ok.
This is one of my favorite sections because I think that it achieves both the slice of life aspect of Jackson.
Ese niño de chasqueador,
a
¿sabes?
stark reminder of how dark the world that they live in really is. To attract attention and curiosity, one of the kids was supposed to make this adorable, messed up little clicker impression, and the others would giggle. We tried a version where if you got close enough, the kid might try to follow you a little before turning back. Since clickers are blind and move by echolocation, for this game of messed up tag, Ellie must close her eyes and listen for when the children give themselves away. The thought was that these kids are in relative safety. They still grow up with the dangers of clickers and runners, and all those lessons would embed themselves in the games that they play. When the festival got cut, they tried to preserve this moment and move it to the front of the game where the snowball fight is, as a tutorial. However, being in the headspace of a clicker doesn't really teach you how to deal with them. Eventually, it evolved, and they instead made the snowball fight, which was, I think, way more effective. For me, it's character illuminating that not only does Ellie know this game, she plays along. There's a familiarity with the kids that's really nice to see, especially because it's such a difference from the Ellie we see later, who has a sort of hollow normalcy that she's trying to get with JJ, but kind of fails.
Vale. ¿Qué es esto? Oh. Ah, mira, ahí está la chica, claro, y aquí esta va a ser la esta, claro. A ver. Y aquí va a ser donde Seth. Ah, mira, Tommy. ¿Y aquí se acaba o no? No, no. Se acaba aquí. Joder, pues nos podían haber dejado mirar qué había dentro. Vale, Ellie acaba atrapada en las alcantarillas de Seattle. Vamos a verlo. Vídeo de presentación, sí, a ver. Que nos introduzca porque sí. La otra, el primer nivel, sí que más o menos tenía idea de cómo iba, pero esto, Alcantarilla de Seattle, tú vete tú a saber. Seattle Sewers, vale.
In this second deleted level, which is an extended sequence of the sewers in Seattle, this comes on the heels of where Ellie goes into a building and she survives an attack by
Sí.
stalkers and gets thrown out of a window and
Sí,
gets
sí,
swept away
sí.
by the current. And then we cut this section that used to be there in the final game. Now you will get to play it. So this was a way to get a bit more interesting puzzles, interesting traversal.
Claro, o sea que cuando pasa, eso que te caes al agua y vas a la alcantarilla, que luego sales como en una especie de edificio y tienes que salir del edificio y ya estás libre, esa parte la cortaron.
Parts of it will feel like assets are missing as far as audio, animation won't be final. But it's a glimpse into
O sea que esa parte iba a ser de las alcantarillas hasta la zona que luego aparecemos, jugable, qué guapo. Qué guapo. Claro, porque hay... Está muy alto, ¿eh? Ah, mira, esto tiene diálogos, claro. Joder. Vale. Toma, desgraciado. Claro que aquí pasa esto y aquí lo corta. Esto ya no se ve. Creo, ¿no? Esto ya en el juego no se ve. Lo cortan antes. ¿Y aquí qué hago? Ah, vale, aquí. Claro. En la caída, cuando se ve que Ellie se cae, ahí lo cortan. Y luego aparece en un edificio que tienes que salir del edificio trepando, es rápido. Sí, 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 sí. Hostia, pues eso está bien, ¿eh?
The ladder acts as an immediate goal for the player, but being able to climb out is not going to be so easy. To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences.
16, este nivel es largo.
Positive to have found a ladder, but then a negative to discover it's not the solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they expect, but not how they expect it.
Vale. Claro, tú ves aquí unas escaleras y dices, son esta. Pero no es. Qué cabrones.
Vale. Habrá otra salida.
Ah, no, sí. Saltando, ¿no? Ah, no. ¿Cómo lo hago? No hay otra zona, ¿no?
The ladder acts as an immediate goal for the player, but being able to climb out is not going to be so easy. To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences. Here, it's a positive to have found a ladder, but then a negative to discover it's not the solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they expect, but not how they expect it.
Claro, pero ¿y cómo llego allí? Ah, vale, creo que ya sé cómo. Claro, por aquí, ¿no? Vale, vale, vale. Claro. Vale.
This level, internally known as Fine Nora, was quite long in duration as we had to make Ellie traverse far distance to the opposite side of downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what we released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more. This was one of the few areas of the game that used water flow as part of a traversal puzzle. The player has to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the other side. We mostly cut this mechanic game wide, however it remained in essence in the section swimming to the aquarium as Ellie when you were avoiding the waves.
Salta el agua un poco más arriba. Y allí no llego, ¿no? ¿De un salto? ¿O sí? No. Ni de coña. A ver.
¿Por qué poco?
¿Cómo se corría en este juego? Ya no me acuerdo. ¿No es el R2? ¿Cómo se corre? ¿No es al joystick? Ay, casi. Creo que es así, ¿eh? A ver, yo lo que quiero es correr. Vale, sí, es con el L1. Ya ni me acordaba, ¿eh? Locura, tío. Vale, 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 vale. Ya estoy aquí, ya estoy aquí. Vale. Vamos a ver. Claro, es por esta puerta ahora. A ver.
When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end. The real reason for this dead end room is that on the reversal when exiting back out of the doorway, players are faced with a route onwards. A pipe that they'd not been able to see when they were swept past it on the way in, and something that was hidden from view when on the side platforms. The intention here being that the only option is to go off the standard path in order to search for a way out.
Vale. Claro, esta es la típica zona en la que tienes objetos, ¿no? Tornillos, etcétera. Sí, sí, sí. Claro, y es por allí. Qué cabrones. Hay algo aquí.
Qué ganas de largarme.
Ahí va.
Throughout the rest of the level, we also used light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. At each turn, however, we blocked the direct route forward. Players would know that they just have to keep finding alternative paths, promoting those feelings of being desperate and trapped.
Esta gente sabe hacer lo que tiene que hacer, ¿eh?
We
Sí,
slowly
sí.
introduced the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight spaces. This is to slowly build up to, and encourage, the player to climb into such a small pipe that they'll have to be crawling on their stomach, which is something that the player previously may not have recognised as a playable space, let alone the desired route they need to take.
Claro.
Arriba y afuera. Tú ve arriba y afuera.
We added a tiny space just to reward the player's exploration with a pickup item, and we made sure it was something that made sense that you'd find in this area. A canister and all the garbage that had been washed into the sewers from the surface. We loved the idea of making Ellie prone through a tiny dirty pipe in order to get out, as it was a great opportunity to use our prone mechanic. A unique camera setup was created to support crawling in these pipes, as the standard prone camera is much higher above the player. We also created custom collision in order for Ellie to manoeuvre in these tight spaces easily. Initially, the oblong collision capsule around her character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort into the custom corner collision, so the movement experience is as smooth as the main game.
Vale.
Joder. Mantén la calma, Ellie.
Pues este nivel lo podrían haber dejado porque está guapo con el agua y tal, ¿eh?
In order for the player to feel cramped, claustrophobic and desperate, we'd been enforcing the traversal mechanics that allow for a tight environment which promote these feelings. We introduced the use of the squeeze through so that we can keep the player feeling enclosed and tight, but without repeating the same geometry. Here we change from low ceilings with wider walls to high ceilings and tight walls to change up the spatial pacing and keep the level from repeating itself.
Claro, ahora ¿por dónde es? ¿Por aquí? Vale, no.
Que te joda el universo.
Vale.
Menudo sitio de mierda para morir.
Originally, we had the waterline much higher here, so players had to swim through this tight tunnel. However, from watching user test feedback, it was occasionally causing people to discount the route entirely and turn back on themselves. So to avoid any risk of this happening in the final game, we present a lower water level so the tunnel is easy to see and commit to using. Although this isn't as impactful without the prone swim, it's the better decision as it means a smoother experience for the player with no backtracking frustration.
No, lo tienen todo pensado, ¿eh?
As we surface from the water and over the crest of the slope, we reveal what is further in this tunnel. A clicker that has sprouted and the fungus has grown on the sides of the pipe. It was great to see people who user tested this area becoming increasingly worried as we forced the player to squeeze past the fungus and inches away from the clicker's face, all the time not being sure whether the clicker might be alive or attack them. Although we aren't as cruel as to force a clicker attack in such close proximity, we do have a payoff for this moment. This clicker momentarily turned into Joel to show Ellie's PTSD from what happened to Joel at the start of the game. Ultimately, we decided to save this moment for the farm level, as it was more impactful there because it could become the centrepiece of that experience. Whereas in the sewers, we weren't able to make it as much of a narrative point and give it the breathing room and reaction time that it deserves, given the tight space.
¡Puta mierda!
Joder. Hostia. Hostia. Buah, esto está guapo, Imagínate esto, tío. Buah, pero eso está muy guapo. Era Joel, claro, lo ha dicho. Hostia, pero ¿y por qué esto no lo hicieron? Está guapísimo este.
¡Mierda!
Vaya. No, pero este está guapo, Este nivel. Esto me suena más, Allí no llego, ¿no? No. ¿Esto sí estaba en el juego? Me suena a mí esto, que tienes que ir por la tubería. Esto sí está, ¿no?
Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge.
Pavo, podrían haber dejado lo de Ellie, O sea, lo de Joel con el chasqueador. Eso está muy guapo, tío. Eso está muy, muy, muy guapo. No sé por qué no lo dejaron.
The last ladder climb is quite lengthy, and although we could have trimmed it down to a shorter climb, we liked how this last segment of the journey built anticipation for whether there was success at the top or not after all you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects in the final game. Ellie then has to find her way to the hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
Sí. ¿Ves? Y ahí es ya cuando subes las escaleras y ya estás en eso es lo que yo decía. Vale, y ahora la cacería. ¿Cuánto llevamos de video? Vale, 30 minutos, vale, podemos jugarlo, yo creo, sí, vamos a ver. La cacería, esto es en una gasolinera, pone, gasolinera. O no sé. The Hunt. A ver, a ver.
For this third and final deleted level, what we call the boar hunt sequence, this was a sequence pretty late in the game. It was right after the whole Seattle Abby sequence where Abby spares Ellie. And then we wanted to come back into Ellie's story, but keep it a bit mysterious of how much time has passed, where is Ellie now? So we're coming in on Ellie, and she's following a trail of blood. And we wanted to mirror, in a way, the deer hunt sequence from the first game, but this time do it with a boar. And there's something with Ellie that now she can't let go of this violence. She's pursuing it, even against this innocent animal. This was another opportunity to show how the violence that Ellie has experienced, the violence that she witnessed being afflicted onto Joel, is still sticking with her, and she's still experiencing these PTSD moments. This was a sequence that was pretty far along and was cut pretty late in production. Parts of it are still really rough, but the gameplay, the building blocks were all there. I think you'll have fun to see, like, again, a rough, unfinished sequence that you can play. You can see all the way to the end, and including a cinematic that we end up cutting. And the remnants of the sequence ended up being mentioned in Ellie's journal. So this part of the story that we developed still made its way into the game as kind of optional stuff that you could read about, but here you get to experience it. So as a reminder, this is pretty rough, months away from being finished, but you get to see it now.
Claro, esto es después, ¿no? Claro, que es cuando... Vale, que esto es cuando dice... cuando sale la primera vez que sale con el conejo, que caza un conejo, pues en vez de eso, querían hacer esto, ¿no? Vale.
So the boar hunt was one of the hardest levels for me to work on. It was a huge challenge with the systems that we had, and we kept trying, but it never felt quite right. Originally, the level happened after the Jackson Festival, which also got cut, but before Farm. Once the festival got cut, it became the prologue to Farm. The intended experience is that we jump forward in time after the fight with Abby in the theater. We don't know where Dina is. We likely assume she's dead because she was just bleeding out. Ellie is alone. Her hair is short. So maybe this is the future or the present. And she's hunting. Hunting who? Abby still?
Claro, aquí tienes la incertidumbre si está yendo a por Abby o no. Claro, es que pues nosotros porque sabemos que es un jabalí, pero si esto te lo ponen en el juego no te lo dicen. Claro, claro, claro. No te lo dicen y podría ser Abby. A ver, con toda esta sangre, un poco raro que fuese Abby, ¿no? Pero... porque un humano pierde esta sangre y yo creo que se muere, ¿no? No sé.
In early iterations of the fight, it was more arena-like. The player slowly whittles down the boar's health. Ellie gets more visceral and more vicious. We get a little worried about her. As the boar gets weaker, more panicked, more feral, and we start feeling sympathetic to the boar was the hope. In all of these iterations, especially of these wider areas, it required custom AI and scripting to make sure it continued to feel organic as an animal, but we really needed it to do specific stuff. It needed to be able to close distances really, really quickly. It needed to charge to attack, but we wanted the feeling of hunting, so we needed to track it down from afar. And we also needed to discourage the player from attacking the boar when it's that close, or it would kind of turn into this melee kerfuffle. How do we do this in our world while keeping the boar believable? We must have gone through 5 or 6 iterations of the boar fight and all, and every single time it changed pretty drastically. We split it into clear phases, where one was like all long range. We tried another where you're getting close and you get the jump on it quite literally. You're jumping off of a rock to attack it. And then finally, we tried a bunch where you almost sort of go around a bunch of trailers and try and wrestle it. We uncovered after some time that taking down a boar over several phases felt very laborious and a little dramatic. It was comically long. It felt too boss-like, a little too gamey. We decided to cut the first few phases, and we opted for a cold open after the boar had already been hurt off screen. So that allowed us to focus on feeling like we're closing in on prey and to introduce the boar when it was at its most dangerous. Already hurt, already feral, much too close for comfort. And so the thinking was it would bring us more into Ellie's mindset. Is this really hunting for food, or is she hunting for some other reason?
Claro. Después de toda la venganza... Claro, después de toda la venganza... No sabes si lo está haciendo para comer o por puro gusto, ¿no? ¿Qué es esto? Productos frescos, cerveza, vino, helado, recuerdos, tienda de equipo de montaña, reposta aquí. Claro, y aquí te metes con el jabalí.
The gas station was built to highlight the boar's destructiveness. Since it's cramped, the boar feels larger. We also feel trapped with it, though perhaps it's trapped with us. When it charges, it gets to us quickly, so we must be on our toes. This made it more aligned with Ellie's sort of hunting for trouble mindset. Listening became more important, as well as moving around slowly so it didn't hear you. Could you spot it before it saw or heard you? And could you get a shot off quickly enough so you could dodge out of the way? Or is the shot worth the cost after? It feels like a gamble. By the end of the fight, everything would likely be in shambles, the boar would burst through the back, and Ellie would follow it and finally enact revenge.
Vale. No veo nada.
Joder, qué susto, coño.
Caput. Ya está. No hay a dónde ir.
¿Tú te sabes, tío?
The boar kill was supposed to be anything but glorious. With the boar whimpering at the back of the gas station after Ellie's relentless hunt. After this, hearing the drone that we kinda come to associate with Ellie's trauma, we would hard cut to the stream where she's washing her hands and holding rabbits that she hunted, about to return to Dina. And there would be no mention of the boar.
Vale, aquí nos va a dar un susto, supongo. Ah, no, está herido, pobrecito. Joder. Pero mátalo ya, joder, pobrecillo. A ver, ve a Joel. ¿Y no lo mata? Hostia, pues los tres... A ver, el de Jackson me parece el menos... A ver, es que en verdad lo de Jackson es un flashback, pero que también iba a entrar esto, ¿no? El de Jackson es el que veo menos... El más flojo, pero estos dos hubiesen estado bastante bien, ¿eh? Este me ha gustado, la cacería. Este me ha gustado. Y el de las alcantarillas también. La verdad que los dos me han gustado mucho. Los dos son la hostia. Este es un poquito más flojo. Pero no está mal, ¿eh? No está mal. Así que, chicos, en el próximo vídeo ya empezaremos la historia principal. Pero lo voy a hacer... bueno, le voy a dar, ¿vale? Pero no. Bueno, importar partida esto se puede. Que lo voy a hacer ahora porque para el platino. Pero... jugaré una partida totalmente nueva en la dificultad más tocha, que creo que es realista, ¿no? Bueno, o realista es cuando te pasas el juego. Bueno, no sé. La más difícil que haya me la voy a poner, ¿vale? Porque creo que en la dificultad más difícil creo que es... Tienes recursos o sea, muy limitados, muy pocos recursos. Obviamente te quitan mucha más vida. Quitas tú menos, supongo. Serán más... Tendrán más vida los enemigos. Yo creo que puede estar guapo, ¿eh? Lo voy a pasar mal, yo creo. En algunas partes tiene que estar complicado en modo tocho. Espero que me deje en modo realista. No sé si... A ver si le doy. Sí me deja, Mira, aquí pone, la experiencia de juego más exigente y realista. En este modo de juego cambian ajustes como el modo escucha, el HUD y otros elementos. O sea, tiene que ser esto tocho. Pues lo vamos a... Sí, lo voy a jugar en realista. Y me la pela. Lo voy a jugar en lo más difícil. Y a ver qué tal. Así que bueno chicos, espero que os haya gustado, dejar like, suscribiros y nos vemos en el siguiente vídeo. Chao.